Welcome to What Grows. It's a podcast where we play with the connection between who we are and how we grow. I'm your host, Noella Mashi. So, Sophie, what draws me to this conversation is how you think about language. You talk about finding language for empathy, healing, and justice in complex systems. And I think that's exactly what we need more of. People who can translate between structural violence and human experience, between policy and poetry, between what is and what could be. And your journey started at age 16 as a community mobilizer in Nairobi. You were working with young mothers and children with disabilities, and you moved into anti trafficking work after a personal revelation 8 years ago. You describe yourself as a feminist, teacher, poet, and survivor leader. And you write that it took time to accept being called an activist, and that feminism gave you language for the systemic issues around you, and that claiming the identity of a survivor leader is itself an act of reclaiming space in systems that often exclude survivors or put them in boxes. So, I want to talk to you about the work of becoming, how we claim identities that come with stigma sometimes, how we teach from lived experience, and how we find language for things we've lived but couldn't always name. So, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much. That has to rank among the top uh what is this top introductions anybody has ever done for me. So I'm impressed.
Oh, well, I'm so glad we could talk. So, my favorite question that I love to ask everyone is if you could give your life a title like it was a book, what would it be?
Interesting because I'm in the process of actually writing a book. Maybe this is my time to put it out in the world and actually say. So I've always said the title of my book is Dancing in My Own Shadow.
Mm,
And I picked it from a song where someone claimed that they were dancing in their own, like dancing in their own shadow, right? Because I feel like for me, my personal experience and how my lived experience has always been the place which I've led from and the place which, as you are saying, I found language for things, right? And some of those things have not been great. So for me, the idea of like my dance is not necessarily to anything, but to my personal experience, to my lived experience is such an important thing that I'm an expert in this thing that is called life, my life, which just
mm,
happens to be affected by so many things. And I'm not saying that it's special as much as it's the experience of many like women who are like me, who look like me, and claiming that place and making that place like a place of joy and celebration and dance is so important to me. So yeah, dancing in my own shadow would be
mm.
the title.
I love that. I mean, just the visual of dance and also just everything that's meant by shadow and the thought or the idea of being an expert in your own life and how we all are experts in our own
Yeah.
lives. Um, so you mentioned that it took time to accept being called an activist, that it's something people see you as, and what your journey's mostly been about. What shifted for you in claiming that identity, and when did it start to fit?
I think for me it was difficult because I'm not sure. It's only recently that development has made people who are activists by choice, right? Because I feel like the things that people are saying I was an activist for or against or anything were just me responding to my lived experience, right? I had no choice. I had no choice as to fighting back or speaking for certain things. So my difficulty was in people claiming that the experience of my life was in itself activism. I had a difficulty doing that. That because for me, because I didn't have a choice. I felt like activism should be something that you sort of have agency over. that I choose to stand for this. I feel like most of the things that I choose to stand for and against are a result of things that have happened to me and to my community. And that in itself makes me really, really angry, right? It's not a place.
Mm,
People make it seem like when they call you activist, like there is some, like when you're calling me activist, I want you to understand what I've been through to have to fight back. My activism is an act of fighting back. And so my vision is that I live a life where I don't have to fight back anything. So I think claiming that the identity of activist was difficult just because of that, because people are ascertaining some form of joy and things that I personally hadn't experienced in living. That was not the process of my
mm,
lived experience. I think in accepting the title activist, for me, it was accepting that I will always resist. It was the acceptance of that I will always resist, right? And that when people call me an
mm,
activist, what they're saying is that you are the person who's resisting. So I accepted that term in my own terms, not what people mean. It's that when people call me an activist, I'm like, yeah, I'm the resistance. That's what you're saying.
mm.
Like,
Yeah.
like, I feel like people don't recognize that. Yeah, I'm the resistance, and there are different forms of resistance. For me, my life is the resistance. For other people, it might be
Yeah.
something that's a joy for you to do. But for people who are claiming lived experience as the space where they're doing their activism, their very life is the resistance. And I don't know if people understand that, because I feel like when I talk about lived experience, people really don't understand that I wake up. Most of the survivors, they wake up to resist, right? They wake up to resist. It's that they would not have been alive. It's not,
Mm.
I didn't study this in a book. I didn't study I didn't study how to deal with trauma in a book. I didn't study how to deal with certain situations in a book. It's that it happened to me. I understand what it means and I understand the tools because I've lived through them. And so when you call me an activist, I feel like the respect should be that my body is the resistance. This had nothing to do about it's my body. Literally, my body is the resistance to this.
Um, I would love to take us back and just ground everyone who's listening in the context of where that question about activism came from. By having you share your story, maybe this could be a question, but please feel free to build off of it. Um, in your writing, you describe yourself as radicalized by personal experience. Can you tell me about the moment when personal experience became political for you and when you found language for something you'd been living but couldn't name?
So I feel like I'm not someone who likes talking about my personal story, because sometimes I feel like my story, most of the time when you give like the script of what happened to you, people get lost in the detail of the personal narrative more than like what is systemic behind that, right? So I think my story, I've said like my I've always said that what has kept me grounded is my family, right? I come from a family where my dad was always pro education, my mom, all of them like really activists in their, I would say activists in their own light, because recently, having seen and thought about how my parents raised me versus what the community was raising people back then, I've realized that that by itself was activism, because I grew up in a house where I could speak up. I could, I was encouraged to speak up. I was encouraged to debate. I was encouraged to read. I was encouraged to like critically think and think about things. And then came in poverty, right? And then that took away a lot of things, but that has never taken away this foundation, right? So I tell people that I feel like sometimes we approach taking care of children in such a flimsy way, because we just think that we are supposed to wake up, get married, have children. Yet that, for me, that foundation of having two people who love each other, take care of children they chose to have, and have dedicated to and committed to taking care of in a particular way, for me is the most radical part of my story. I think so. It's the
Mm.
most of my story because even my interpretation of love, joy, everything are things that were grounded at home. I was accepted at home. I'm fully accepted at home. So it's very difficult for me to seek acceptance anywhere else. That's why even when I was saying when I got married, like leaving home was not a question. It has never been a question for me because like this is where I come from. This is where my roots are. I'm very proud to be from my family, from my parents. I'm very proud to be my dad's daughter, my mom's, because these are decent human beings, who like I turned 40 this year, and I tell people that all this gentle parenting, like we had gentle parenting, and I'm 40. So you can imagine what sort of I think it's most people our age that are doing gentle parenting now. But we had it, right? My parents always had it. My dad made I've made so many sacrifices for me, even while I'm an adult. So I don't take for granted the kind of what right now I call revolutionary parenting that my parents did in from the beginning, so that when these other things were happening to me, it was very clear to me that this is not what was supposed to be happening to me. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's what
Yeah.
realize about like abuse, that just the first, if you've been going through abuse for a long time, your body stops recognizing abuse, right? But if you've been fine for a long time, then as soon as something bad happens to you, your whole system recognizes that this is abnormal. So for me, the first thing, the
Yes.
love at home and the grounding at home gave me the ability to recognize that when I was being abused, that this is not okay. This is not how things are supposed to be, because I know how things are supposed to be.
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Wow.
and
Yeah.
and that that has really also grounded the work that I do, because I'm always so focused on helping people imagine how good things they could be rather than just treatment. So imagination also as a tool for recovery and healing is certainly an important space for me. So I think when my dad lost his job, my uncle took advantage and then trafficked me for domestic work and went through the whole
Mhm.
experience for a whole year. So I went through abuse for a whole year, both physical, psychological, sexual. Like it's grueling. It was bad. But then my mother was still able to get me out of the situation because my uncle lied about going to school. So I always say that that 1 year of my life feels like a glitch in my story,
Mm.
because I think
Mhm.
a lot of people put a lot of meaning on that 1 year of my life. But for me, there's all these other years before and after that are so big and so radical in the ways they are, but they did. As I'm saying, I recognized I was going through something that I wasn't supposed to go through. I recognized that there was something that was clearly wrong. Now, having dealt with many survivors, I recognize that it was a privilege for me to be able to recognize at 13 that whatever was happening was not okay, and that even though I couldn't name it, I could feel it, I could sense
Mhm.
it. Everything in me knew that this was not wrong, despite not having the language. And when I got out of it, and my parents took me out of it, they ensured that I was taken care of. My father and my mother believed the story that I came home with. And that's
Mhm.
another thing, right? That many of the victims of violence and survivors of violence, the first person they retell their story to never believes them, questions it. And it does something to your system when you tell a story, and then a story of something that has happened to you in your body, and it is questioned, right? It is questioned. And for me, that's what makes me even question the systems that we have, right? Because the systems that we have require questioning of the narrative for all the survivors that have gone through violence. It doesn't matter how just that system is set, there's a questioning.
Right. Right.
And that questioning shakes you to your core. I don't have that experience of questioning, right? I have the experience of my parents came, they believed me. Everything I said about my experience, they believed me. They cut off the family. They said anybody who didn't believe me, my parents cut them off.
Mm.
That kind of action
Wow.
is not a foundation that many survivors have, because many survivors actually lose their community as a result of claiming the narrative of abuse, like claiming
Mm.
and saying it loud. So many people would rather have that narrative in their body, in their minds, but not claim it publicly, because once you put your narrative out there, you are leaving it as debate for people to analyze and think about. Um, and again, that's why I'm saying I'm very privileged that even though my parents didn't know what to do, they knew how to love me. That's why
Mhm.
for me,
Mhm.
healing is so simple. Like making it the complex things that we're making it is frustrates me. Healing is about being validated. It's about being listened to. It's about being held. It's about presence, right? Those are the things that people need to be able to heal, to be able to claim their voice and move towards it. My parents were not social workers. My parents were not trained in trauma informed and all these things. I wasn't taken from trauma therapy or all these things I've come to like later on, take them on. But what healed me was the community I had, was my parents, of my family. So for me, that has also been an important thing, because I believe that what worked for me can work for other people. So, and for me, it's been consistently seeing that survivors of violence don't have community. They don't, you claim, even, even the public survivors that speak, someone speaks about the fact that they've been raped and there'll be 20 people there questioning their story, right? Questioning, like,
Mhm.
did that happen to you? And so for me, again, as I'm saying, my my activism or the things that I propose as solutions are not academic. And I would, because I'm also someone who thinks a lot, right? And I would love, it's very interesting for me that my life m- panned out the way it did, because I genuinely would have been an academic, but I
Mm.
feel like I'm not, simply because there's so much that has happened to me over the years that for me is a better lesson to share with the world than anything I would study in a book
Yeah.
or theorize
Yeah.
for in a book. Yeah.
You there's a few steps that you've outlined that I think are a really valuable way to think about kind of the journey to healing. First, being able to know in your body, know in your mind that something is wrong with the way I'm being treated right now. Second is when you tell your story, it's believed. And then third is you can return to your community. Like these three things need to be true. And some of that comes from internally, but it seems like a big part of that comes from the response externally as well. What
Yeah.
do we do in situations where survivors don't have the positive experiences to know what's wrong, don't have someone believing their story, are unable to return to the community? What does the journey of healing look like for folks like that?
So one, uh you need, as you've outlined those three things, I think those three things are important. They don't have to, they don't have to be, there's spaces that provide that. And for me, that's why the alternative communities then become important. So if there's an organization, if there's a loose community that is there, then it's important for folks to connect with that. But what has happened for many people now is that even it's not that there's an acknowledgement, it's that most of the organizations start with treating the trauma. And again, I'm I'm going on record here to say that the kind of rehabilitation that we do needs to be fixed because, and I've said this before, when you work with survivors and we talk about treating and rehabilitating them instead of rehabilitating the community that abused them. I
Mm.
think
Wow.
so. Like a lot of organizations speak about rehabilitation, and I'm like, what are we rehabilitating? Like I went through, like even just the language that we use already makes it tell survivors that they're in without telling them that they are the ones who need to fix themselves for the community. So for me, I genuinely believe that we need to shift. We need to build alternative communities for survivors, especially those that their communities are not going to give them these three steps. And it's important that then we replicate that in the
Mhm.
spaces of healing. So organizations that are dealing with women who've gone through violence, I think the first thing is to say, I believe you. I
Mhm.
believe you.
Mhm.
Yeah, you. And then now take them through that process. But sometimes I feel like that's not what's done. Uh, and again, the language of protection being rehabilitation is something I've fought with a lot in the space, in the protection, in the care and protection space, because I don't think we should be saying we are rehabilitating survivors.
I
And then also,
totally agree with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also the fact that we then take them outside. Like there's a lot that we are saying with our heads that that I think just affirms different things. That's what I feel.
It's so I've never thought about it that way until you said it. But who are we really rehabilitating? Is it the survivor or the community that needs rehabilitation? I don't want to go into what causes a community to kind of not allow, but like for abuse to happen. But I do want to go into what does it take to rehabilitate the community? What does it mean to
Mm,
educate and support the community such that survivors can return home?
a lot of things. And I'm going to talk about the fact that it's a lot of things and it's a lot of movement work and partnership that I think development has destroyed fundamentally, according to me, right? Because you to fully rehabilitate a community, the community needs to see all these systemic issues as connected, right? As connected. But the reality is that most organizations, most movements are working independently, right? So any kind of education is coming one way, like it's coming from different streams rather than us collectively saying this is what abuse looks like. It might have these different heads, but this is fundamentally what it looks like. And so for me, the kind of education that is required is cross movement conversations. It's really infiltrating, like having conversations in places where we are not having conversations, right? People are not coming, people are not going to come. And I know the development work has done this. People are not going to come to our workshops to be preached at. That's not going to
Mm.
change anyone. We have to create relationships in communities. And that's why again, I don't understand how we can like most of the work just needs to be done by the community members, right? Who understand those communities, who understand those cultures. The conversation needs to happen. Like right now, I was just having a conversation with my dad about gender-based violence, right? And we're having like a debate around it because we have a lot of debate in my house. And my dad we were talking about like what was happening before and what is happening right now. And my dad was actually saying, oh, the law right now really protects women. And then I said, it's a perception, right? it's a perception that it really protects women, when in reality, the reason why it really protects women is because women are the ones who've been generally been abused. But the law that has been placed, the purpose of that law is also to protect men. It's that even if a woman actually hits a man, that this needs the man can be able to take action, right? And then I was like,
Mm.
gender, take away the word gender, right? Do you support violence? I asked him, like, do you support violence? Like, no, I don't. And then I was like, what's the argument, right? The way we name things, right? Like, for me, it was interesting in that moment to notice that naming it gender based violence all of a sudden made my dad, who's really rational, start debating things. But as soon as I started
Mhm.
asking fundamentally, do you support violence? And his answer was no. I tell him, Do you think there's something acceptable, anything for someone to be violated?" And my dad is like, no. Then I said, okay, there's no need for me to even explain to you gender-based violence because you already know fundamentally you're not supposed to abuse anyone. So what languages are we using, especially if we insist that we want people, we're not meeting people where they are in
Mhm.
their language, in their knowledge, and we're not working together strategically, right, to talk about that. And then change mainly happens in relationships. And I know we want to do big systemic work, and that's possible, but it's not going to come if we don't think about public education, like public awareness in relationships as part of what's going to change, right? You can change a whole community by having two conversations with the chief. Like, for example, right? We have stories of I forget her name, but she just passed away the other day, who's a chief in Malawi, who stopped like several child marriages because of the power that she had and the understanding that she had of her culture to be able to stop. We cannot distance ourselves from humanity and expect any kind of change to happen. Because for me, the same way
Mhm.
healing happens in relationship, teaching and change happens in relationships. We can talk about it
Mhm.
systemically and all those things, but at the end of the day, it's relationships. Even if you hear most of the stories of abolition in the past and everything, it was that someone had a relationship with somebody else and then recognized their humanity, recognized that this was wrong, and then started supporting, right? I've had conversations with
Yes.
people who are absolutely racist, right? But then they were ready to defend their black person or this person that is in their family or is in their neighborhood, right? Meeting people where they are allows us to recognize that people are human first. They're human
Yeah.
first. So for me, change is going to be slow, but it has to happen in relationships. It has to happen in community. It has to involve us meeting people where they are in their knowledge and not preaching at people, which most of our language right now is too academic and too preachy. Uh, uh, where
Mhm.
like sometimes I sit down and I'm like, the people who actually need this knowledge would never listen to you. I sit in rooms and I'm like, yeah, they would never listen to you, right? They would
Mm.
never listen to you. You take an issue like domestic servitude and child labor, right? There are several things that could easily stop it on its foot. Put free education, put free feeding in schools. All of a sudden, many children will be in school. You don't have to preach to people, they will automatically do it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there are certain things that, and then also we have to assume, and it's a difficult assumption to accept. We have to assume that in many ways, people are acting rationally according to the knowledge that they have. And that becomes like, it's a hard truth. And maybe it's because I'm a teacher that I'm in my, like, someone. Even when someone is doing something absolutely ridiculous, what we've been taught to do most of the time is to dehumanize that person. And we use
Mm.
languages that basically separates them, because I think when another human being does something, and for me, this was more of one of the reasons when I was dealing with the trauma that I was going through as a result of the abuse I went through. For me, my biggest fear in dealing with that trauma, wasn't was that I could become like my uncle. And my biggest fear was the
Mm.
fact, if he could do this, and the same blood that runs through me runs through him, it means I have some sort of infection that could make me abuse somebody else. And I think that sometimes we fear knowing that we have the capacity of evil, abuse, and everything like anybody else who's doing it. We fear accepting that truth. So what we do is we
Mhm.
dehumanize that person so that we can separate ourselves from them. But that is not useful in trying to rehabilitate a community, because you have to make that assumption of this person is acting rationally. Most of the time, people are acting rationally based on the information they have and the experiences for me, that's why experience is important, is because if you sit with someone's lived experience, their reaction suddenly becomes rational.
I want to go into that because it speaks to your approach to teaching, your approach to generating knowledge as much as sharing the knowledge is what does it take to sit with someone or an idea that is seemingly irrational and to find some level of empathy or understanding of it? How do you strengthen or fortify yourself to do that kind of difficult work?
Community, again, like I'm surrounded by people who challenge what I know every day. I'm surrounded by people who encourage me to take in fresh knowledge, and I've always been able to change my mind, right? I think part of the problem is that so many people are married to their ideas and opinions. I'm not that married to my ideas. Half the time I'm like, I could be wrong, but this is what I think, this is what I feel. And that's why I couldn't be an academic, because being an academic requires some sort of confidence in what you know that I feel like I don't have that kind of confidence of I know something to be able. So for me, it's very easy to unlearn something I knew, because I'm not that, like I don't feel, I don't think it says anything about me if I change my mind about something. So I think
Mhm.
that's one. I think really, for you to sit down with people's lived experience, you have to be not married to your ideas. You have to be flexible, right? So ability to actually change your mind. And you also have to just be generous with what you know, right? So for me, it would be those three things. So for me, it's not easy. It's because I've always been willing to learn and unlearn what I know. So this being like a constant learner, as much as I'm a teacher, is an important aspect of, and people's lived experience are fascinating. Like I'm just like I don't get why we like it's very fascinating to sit down and just listen to people's opinions about something, what they've gone through. Like who was I? We have at Azadi, the organization I founded, we have a book, like a reading circle or book club that I started. Because for me, I think books are fascinating, because books have the ability to then not make it about you. Like if it's rape, we're
Mm.
discussing rape to Amina in the book, as opposed to the
Mhm.
one that happened to me. So we have a world where we can negotiate, change, debate, all the things that are happening to us without it being personal, right? So we were having,
Mhm.
it was a story, we read a story where abortion was not even the main topic in that book. so many things were happening in the book to in the arc of the story. But then abortion became such a huge factor because of the way the writer had weaved it in, right? The writer had weaved in abortion in the sense that, this person had gone through this, like properly laid out to the point that, you know, abortion was didn't even feel like her choice. It felt like the only thing this person could do to actually live the following day. And also the fact, like the way they handled the subject was in a very respectful way. So then in the end, we ended up having to have the conversation around abortion. And when we started, I was like, okay, because of this is something that is there. As how many people are pro-life, how many people are pro-choice? Just for a chance. Uh, Around 90% pro-life, 90% pro-choice, right? I was like, okay, cool. I was like, let's have a conversation about what it means to be pro-choice and what it means to be pro-life. And then so people start dissecting and it becomes a whole conversation. And everyone is like, so I ask, so if you're pro-life, do you support this? Do you support this? And then I'm like, guy, so the more we listed it, the more the people who are quote unquote pro-life realized that they were pro-choice. Like fundamental. So
Mm.
we ended up at a point where most of the people who were pro-life, the main reason why they were pro-life was as a result of religion. And we narrowed
Mm.
it down to um, I don't no matter what my religion is, I don't want my religion telling other people what to do. My religion is about me. So no one is forcing you
Mm.
to have an abortion, right? And then they said they have a
Mhm.
problem with promoting abortion. I said, okay, no one is also forcing you to promote abortion. So we had a discussion and we were like, what if this character came to you? What would you do? And then we had a whole debate where they said that the biggest problem is, you know, I don't want to recommend abortion to someone. Then say, don't recommend abortion to someone. No one, those of us who are pro choice are not saying that you recommend abortion to someone. We are saying give someone all the options and then let them choose what they want, right? And we were like, you can send them to us. So we ended up as a community deciding and creating like a referral pathway for safe abortion. So anybody who
Mm.
feels uncomfortable with giving like, you know, open information, we're like, these are the resource people. These are the main resource people that if someone comes to you and they're pregnant and they need support, you don't need to tell them anything because you don't have the capacity to help them. Just refer them to this person. That's it. And that became an
Mm.
acceptable thing. And everybody, by the time we were done, everyone was pro-choice. And I was like, that is never going to happen on a debate on TV. It's never going to
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
Like that kind of analysis, that kind of thinking and discussion, and people being vulnerable about what they know without risk of being called stupid or being called conservative or being called all the things we call people, right? So relationship, like what space are we also creating for people to be wrong, especially if them being is being wrong in their thinking, not necessarily in their doing.
Yeah. Well, so if change happens in relationship, which I agree with, what are the implications then for organizations that want to scale their impact? Do you believe growth at, kind of scaling up an organization like yours is possible without one-on-one interactions?
I don't believe
Or
in scale.
how would it work? Okay.
I don't believe in scale. I genuinely do not believe in scale. I believe that which is what, even when the discussion about Azadi, which I left, um, about scale started, what they've ended up doing is writing a story about their model and saying this is one of many models that you could use, right? So if you want
Mhm.
to do the work that we're doing, you can use this model or you can think about another model. So support other communities. I think scale There's some sort of, I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I just genuinely don't believe in scale because I believe that communities, the change should happen in communities and should be done by the people in that community. So therefore, scale for me is not. I believe in learning from each other. I believe in cross collaboration and all these things. But no, I don't believe in scale. I believe that if you have impact in one place, I don't think that you are necessarily going to replicate that in another
Mm-hmm.
community, especially if you are not strongly grounded in the community.
Talk to me, given that, talk to me about supporting the work. And I know you don't have to tell me that the kind of nonprofit system and the donor system is kind of it's broken, but how do you get the resources that you need to do your work from people who are trying to scale? Or if you don't get it from them, how do you get the resources from the community or elsewhere to keep doing the good work you're doing?
So, first of all, I believe that the models that most, which is a question I ask most organizations, is what is the work that you can do without money? Without relying on any daughters, what is the work that you can be able to do? Do that work. Make that your core work. Make it work well. So that in case anybody ever says they don't want to support you, you it's not your core work that fails. It's maybe additional things that you are taking over, right? So I fundamentally believe that movements and communities can be able to support themselves if we are really, really honest about what we can do and what we can't do. I think what development has done for us is allowed us to do things that we couldn't do. And that's great. But it's really not strategic when resources, when now you're fully depending on this person to create because I believe like what development has done is sort of make us suspend our imagination about what we can do. That's that for me. That's and I know it's like a dangerous thing to say. It's that we there are things we could have imagined of about doing resolving that solution in our community that we didn't do because the funding was there. Like our immediate
Mm.
thing was to think we need funding,
Can you give
and
me an
these people came.
example?
Okay, so let's give an example of a shelter. Most shelters are actually funded by outside donors, right? A few are funded by communities. Um, I was just trying to have a conversation like to find out, like before development work came and people are still being abused. People still needed shelters. Where did they seek shelter from? It was mainly from communities members. It was
Mm.
community members. So what happened when development came is that we delegated that care to somebody else. So the community stopped caring for its people. So, in
Mm.
terms of even something like shelters, what if community members were the shelters? Were the places that people rent to? Were the places that we supported? So I'm just saying, and this is just like an imagine something I've been thinking about, right? Like, is it possible for us to shelter each other rather than have a whole institution doing that? I think it's possible. And that whole community education that we are talking about, that community, if the community understands this is wrong, blah blah blah, then it means certain things happen to certain people. How many people have servant quarters that are have storage? Is a storage unit that could have
Mm.
someone? How many people have an extra bed? I mean, so many. Someone like Jerry Mwigwe who runs Usikwime runs fundraising on Facebook and on her social media and all that, and people raise money. What happened to mutual funds?
Mm. Mhm.
So I think
So where
we've stopped imagining. Like if we understand that We've suspended some form of imagination of how we could resolve our problems internally when we take in these funds. I'm happy to do that. But I think most of the time we are not fully aware of what we've suspended.
I really like that. It's giving me a very different way to kind of see the world. And it's also making me notice the gap between where we are and where we could be, both in terms of imagination. And when I think of myself personally, there's almost this learned helplessness, this I can't make a big enough difference, so I'm not going to try to make any difference at all
Yes.
mentality. There's also the challenge of trust. I am so used to believing it's me against the world that I don't know how to separate that barrier between myself and my community anymore and let people in. I don't think I'm alone in this kind of limiting belief. And so given the mindset that we find ourselves in today, and this kind of sense of I can't do anything, I'm leaving it to the institutions. How do we stretch our imagination at this point?
I think, again, you're not going to start suspending those things if you don't suspend them. Here is where the personal becomes political, right? Is that have you suspended those things for the people closest to you? How are we teaching people in just building relationships in general, right? Because again, as I'm saying, I am the way I am because I feel like my parents gave me a foundation where I just trusted that people are going to be okay. And it's like people are going to teach me fine. It's a dangerous thought. But then it's like truly believing in people's humanity, respecting people's humanity, the same way you respect yours, not making an assumption that you are the only person who could be safe. Also, see looking at the mirror and seeing yourself as an unsafe person because that's what your neighbor thinks of you, right? So how are
Mm,
we doing
mhm,
there are simple things that we used to do that we've stopped doing. You move into an apartment. Do you know who lives next to you? Have you gone and introduced yourself? There are things we don't do anymore, right? We don't do them, and as you're saying, this wall continues to build, right? Because we
mhm.
really actually aren't even creating spaces to have relationships with each other. So I
Yeah.
the answer is I
Yeah.
don't think it's for those walls to crumble if we're also not creating opportunities for us to have those kinds of relationships. Because even if you ask people, people don't have those kind of relationship with their friends. They don't. They don't.
Mm,
So, like, as you're saying, it's you against the world to the point that even the people with your family, with your friends, we are really not as, we're really not, we don't have the skills anymore of building healthy relationships with one another and what
it's
that
so real.
takes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
the kind of vulnerability it takes, right? So, yeah,
Mhm. So we're getting to time, but I have two more questions for you. I mean, the first one is I would love to bring in your poetry. So you are also a poet. How does
yes.
poetry do something for you that other forms of communication can't? Where does poetry show up in your activism, in your story?
For me, the reason why I love poetry is that it doesn't use a lot of words. Like like most poems, like they don't use they use it's few words, but it's few words that capture what you're feeling and leave room for imagination. I feel like for me, poetry is the one thing that has the one tool, and I know other people, some of you are writers of prose and everything, people will come for me here. But I feel like the reason why I love poetry is because it's incomplete. And that
Mm,
allows other people to always complete it. So you read someone's poem, you have the ability to go back in the past, be in the present, and imagine the future. I feel like other forms of literature are too packed and dense. They build the whole picture for you, so it's not incomplete. If I read a story, if I read continuous prose, then I I'm building it because I'm building this thing because all that information had been given to me. So for me, poetry is important because it's incomplete. It is an invitation for you to complete whatever is going on.
Mm,
And for me, that's important as someone who believes that we knowledge is important and knowledge is something that we build collectively. So I need something incomplete to be able to connect with people. For me, poetry was also that I didn't have to be right. There isn't a right poetry, right? There's like it's
mm,
just whatever I feel I can write, and then it's poetry. So whatever I was going through, even if it was darkness or what or whatever, I could just write that thing, and then that was it. I didn't have to come again. There's that thing of the fact that poetry doesn't have to be complete and it doesn't have to be right means that in that moment it helps me, because for me my poetry really helped me in healing by finding just those random words to bubble whatever was happening to me, which I think no other form of literature could be able to do that for me. So yeah, I love poetry because it's
mm, mm.
incomplete.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, my last question is about looking back, but also sort of looking forward. I mean, you started as a grassroots community mobilizer at 16. You're driven by wanting to make everything you saw right because no one made it right for you. Looking back, what would you tell that 16-year-old version of yourself now?
It's interesting because I spoke at Azadi's convening. And when I was giving the key talk, like one of the things that I did with the speech was it was a love letter to the 13-year-old me who went through that abuse. And for me, the message is you are not alone. I think one of the things that this world tries to teach you in every way in order to control you is the idea that you are alone. It's the idea that your experience is unique. It's the idea that you are special in ways that sets you apart from everyone else. But for me, what I would tell that 16-year-old is that you're not alone. And what you're going through is not special. It's not special because it's
Mm.
happening to everyone. And therefore, this is a common experience. And therefore, you don't have to fight alone. And I think that that's
And
something that we need. Yeah.
I want to look 16 years forward. Just what does your work look like in the coming next? I mean, you said you turned 40 this year. What do you want to
Yeah.
say when you're 60 years old about the work that you've done?
Oh my God. Hopefully by then I'm retired. Genuinely, hopefully by then I'm retired because I believe that the the work that I'm doing and the people that are coming after me are way better, way equipped, and have way more tools that I didn't have and that they currently have. I what I hope is that I hope that people can be able to say the things that I've defined myself as, that have lived them, right? That's what I would want. That when people think of me as a feminist, that they think that I've embodied those values. When they think of me as a teacher, that they've seen me learning and seen me teaching, and that I still can be able to continue writing poetry. Yeah, that's kind of what I
Hmm.
want to do. Also, that I had joy, that I did it with joy, right? Because I also feel like there's just a certain type of sort of there's a type of activism that has been almost branded where it's like there's a lot of martyrdom, unnecessary martyrdom of people. I
Mm.
just hope that that's not what happens. I don't want to be a martyr. Like I genuinely do not want to be a martyr, and I feel like the path that we are going, especially in how we build the work in development and in movement work and everything is just we are consistently setting up matters. So I genuinely hope that my work is not about martyrdom, that my work is about the community, and that there are several people who've taken up the roles that I was doing and they're doing it way better than I'm doing it, and that I'm resting. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Sophie. I learned a lot from this conversation. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was nice.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show. It really makes a difference. I'm also always looking for guests who enjoy meaningful conversations. If that sounds like you, send me a message with what you'd like to talk about, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening.